On June 7, 2022, in Jackson, Mississippi, police were called to Fleetwood Drive after a report of gunfire inside a residence. 2 people had been shot while lying in bed. 26-year-old Taria Lamondria Jackson was pronounced dead at the scene, while another victim was injured and taken for medical treatment. In the hours that followed, investigators began gathering evidence and searching for leads. On the same night, another homicide occurred in the city, involving a burned vehicle, adding to the uncertainty of the events. Within days, authorities identified Taria's former partner, Zverian Brent, as a suspect connected to the Fleetwood Drive shooting, and he was arrested. Another individual, Vida Valentine, was also charged in connection with the case. Questions remain about the motive, the sequence of events leading up to the shooting, and whether all circumstances surrounding the attack have been fully addressed.
All right, Chris, thanks. New attendant Jackson man is found guilty of shooting and killing his ex-girlfriend and severely injuring her boyfriend in 2022. Zverian Brent forced his way into Taria Jackson's South Jackson home on Fleetwood Drive and confronted her while she was in bed with her boyfriend, Henry Perry. After a brief argument, Brent shot them both multiple times. Jackson died while Perry survived after returning fire. Brent is set to be sentenced September 30th. He faces a maximum sentence of 40 years for second-degree murder and 20 years for aggravated assault.
This case continues to raise attention and demands closer examination. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Taria Lamondria Jackson was born on May 12, 1996, in Jackson, Mississippi. She grew up in a large household as the second of 8 children, with siblings who later describe her as a central figure in the family structure. Her upbringing was rooted in a family-oriented environment where responsibility was naturally distributed among the children. She attended Provini High School in Jackson, where classmates remember her for her energy and willingness to interact with peers. Teachers describe her as someone who contributed both academically and socially. Her time at Provini formed a foundation of relationships that continued after graduation. Friends describe her as vibrant and outgoing, with an ability to connect easily with people. Taria was the daughter of Antoinette Jackson and Terrence Womack. Both parents remained actively present in her life, contributing to the close-knit family she was raised in. Her role as the second oldest positioned her as a model for her younger siblings, and she maintained a reputation for reliability in the household. Her family ties extended beyond her immediate home. Cousins, aunts, and extended relatives describe her as someone who held a strong presence at family gatherings. Taria's family connections place her at the center of a wide support network, reinforcing her reputation as someone valued in her community. Taria's daily life was defined by ambition. Those close to her describe her as a young woman who actively worked toward her goals. She carried herself in a way that displayed determination and a sense of responsibility. On social media, she shared updates about her life and interactions with friends. Posts reflected her character as approachable, open, and connected to a wide circle of peers. This activity reinforced her role as someone who maintained friendships beyond physical spaces, extending her presence into the online community. Friends and community members described her as full of life, noting her ability to energize those around her. Many referred to her as dependable and trustworthy, pointing to consistent patterns in how she handled relationships and responsibilities. The sudden end to Taria's life on June 7, 2022, disrupted the family unit she had always been part of. Her death removed a daughter, sister, and role model from her family structure. For her siblings, particularly the younger ones, she had been an example of maturity. Her extended family noted that she had represented continuity between generations, as she maintained connections between cousins, siblings, and elders. Friends described her as someone who contributed to stability within her circles. The loss of her presence left a gap that was noted immediately in the days after the incident. In the early morning hours of June 7, 2022, around 4 a.m., Taria was at her home on Fleetwood Drive in Jackson, Mississippi. She and her boyfriend were lying in bed when the incident occurred. Without warning, gunfire erupted inside the home. Shots were directed into the room where the couple was resting. The entry method remained central to understanding the attack. Reports indicate that the shooter either forced entry into the home or gained access in another way. Once inside, the assailant targeted the bedroom directly. Taria was struck multiple times by the gunfire. The pattern of injuries confirmed she was a primary victim. Her boyfriend, also struck during the shooting, sustained injuries but survived. The rapid sequence of gunfire gave little opportunity for defense or escape. The focus and precision of the attack suggested direct intent rather than random violence. The aftermath of the shooting was immediate and chaotic. The boyfriend, though wounded, attempted to respond to the attack. Reports suggest that he returned fire, which may have caused injury to the suspect during the exchange. The scene inside the home reflected the sudden eruption of violence. Gunfire damage, physical injuries, and evidence of forced confrontation. The confined setting of a bedroom intensified the impact of the shooting. The possibility that the suspect was also injured during the incident became a focus for investigators in the hours that followed. Tracing medical treatment requests or unexplained injuries in the area became a lead in identifying the shooter. Police received emergency calls reporting the shooting and arrived at the Fleetwood Drive residence shortly after the incident. Upon arrival, officers entered the home and conducted an initial assessment. They confirmed Taria Jackson had been fatally shot. She was pronounced dead at the scene, with multiple gunshot wounds making resuscitation impossible. Her boyfriend, though severely injured, was still alive. Emergency medical services transported him to a local hospital for treatment. His survival provided investigators with a direct witness to the attack. The police secured the home as a crime scene, collecting ballistic evidence, shell casings, and other forensic material. The condition of the entry points was photographed and documented to determine whether forced access was part of the method used. The incident on Fleetwood Drive was reported to local media within hours, identified as one of 2 homicides occurring in Jackson that same night. Investigators quickly began working to separate the 2 cases, confirming that the burned vehicle homicide elsewhere in the city was unrelated to Taria's murder. When Jackson Police Department officers arrived at a residence on Fleetwood Drive in the early morning hours of June 7, 2022, their first task was to secure the scene. The house was treated as an active crime scene, and the surrounding area was blocked off with crime scene tape to prevent contamination. Officers ensured that only investigators and authorized personnel entered the premises. The initial response involved confirming the fatality of 26-year-old Taria Jackson and ensuring that her injured boyfriend received immediate medical care. Once emergency personnel transported him to a nearby hospital, investigators focused on preserving physical evidence within the house. Crime scene technicians began collecting ballistic evidence. Spent shell casings were recovered from inside the residence, and markings on walls and furniture were documented. The placement of shell casings and bullet trajectories were photographed and measured. Each casing was bagged, tagged, and logged for future forensic comparison. The intent was to link these casings to a specific firearm once one was recovered. Blood samples and other trace evidence were also collected from a room where the shooting occurred. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood for potential witnesses. Neighbors were questioned about whether they heard gunfire, saw suspicious vehicles, or noticed anyone entering or leaving the home during the early hours of the morning. The canvass was designed to create a timeline of events beyond what the surviving victim could provide. Any available surveillance footage from nearby homes or businesses was also requested to assist in reconstructing the movement of the suspect before and after shooting. Within 24 hours, investigators developed a suspect. Evidence and witness accounts led them to identify 29-year-old Zverian Brent as the primary individual of interest. Brent was quickly connected to Taria Jackson as her former partner, establishing a prior relationship. Reports indicated the two had experienced disputes before, suggesting the possibility of ongoing tensions. The identification of Brent was based not only on his known connection to Jackson, but also on statements gathered during the investigation. The surviving victim provided crucial information, as did other individuals familiar with the relationship. Brent became the main suspect in the investigation, and police began an active search for his location. Once Brent was identified, Jackson Police Department issued public alerts. Press releases were distributed to local news outlets, and his photograph and identifying details were made public. Police warned that Brent should be considered dangerous, urging the community to remain cautious and report any sightings immediately. Local media provided consistent coverage during these initial days, repeating police appeals for information.
Jackson man has been found guilty in the 2022 home invasion killing of his ex-girlfriend. Prosecutors say that 32-year-old Zavarian Brent kicked in the door of Taria Jackson's Fleetwood Drive home and then opened fire, killing the 26-year-old and critically wounding her friend, Henry Perry. Perry was able to return fire and survive. A Hinds County jury convicted Brent of second-degree murder and aggravated assault. He faces up to 60 years in prison when he's sentenced September 30th.
Community members were encouraged to call Crime Stoppers or local law enforcement with tips. This public identification of Brent placed pressure on him and made evasion more difficult. After Brent was identified, law enforcement agencies coordinated efforts to locate him. On June 9, 2022, 2 days after the shooting, U.S. Marshals successfully apprehended Brent. Reports confirmed that Brent had sustained injuries, believed to have occurred during the exchange of gunfire inside the home when Taria's boyfriend returned fire. Because of his injuries, Brent required medical treatment, and he was taken to a hospital before being placed in police custody. Following his treatment, Brent was formally charged with capital murder in connection with the death of Taria Jackson. Capital murder is one of the most serious charges under Mississippi law and carries the possibility of life imprisonment or the death penalty upon conviction. Brent made his initial court appearance soon after his arrest. During this hearing, the judge denied bond, ensuring that Brent would remain in custody while awaiting further legal proceedings. This decision was based on the severity of the charge and the violent nature of the alleged crime. In addition to Brent's arrest, another individual, 28-year-old Vida Valentine, was arrested on June 8, 2022, 1 day before Brent. Valentine was accused of assisting Brent in evading law enforcement after the homicide. According to investigators, Valentine's actions following the shooting qualified her as an accessory after the fact to capital murder. Her arrest demonstrated that investigators believed Brent had outside assistance while attempting to avoid capture. Valentine was taken into custody, and her charges were announced publicly. The legal process for both individuals moved forward after their arrests. For Brent, he was formally charged with capital murder. The denial of bond meant he will remain in jail pending trial. His case proceeded through the pre-trial process, which included hearings, motion filings, and preparation for a potential trial. As the primary suspect, his case was treated with the highest level of seriousness. For Valentine, she was charged as an accessory after the fact to capital murder. Accessory charges carry significant penalties, though not as severe as the primary offense. Her legal status depended on proving her level of involvement in Brent's actions after the shooting. Bond was considered for her case, though the outcome of those proceedings varied depending on evidence presented. Together, the arrests of Brent and Valentine marked a major step in the investigation. Law enforcement secured both the primary suspect and the alleged accomplice, laying the groundwork for the judicial system to determine accountability. After the arrest of Zavarian Brent, age 29, in connection with the shooting death of Taria Lamondria Jackson, he was presented before a judge for his first court appearance. During this hearing, the charges against him were formally read. Brent was charged with capital murder, a charge which under Mississippi law carries the possibility of life without parole or the death penalty. The seriousness of the charge immediately elevated the case into a high-profile status within the local legal system, even if subsequent updates faded from media coverage. During the first appearance, Brent's attorney did not secure bond on his behalf. The presiding judge formally denied bond, citing both the severity of the charges and the circumstances of the alleged crime. The denial of bond indicated that Brent will remain in custody pending further court proceedings. In a separate but related process, Vida Valentine, age 28, was arrested shortly after Brent. Valentine was charged as an accessory after the fact to capital murder. Court documents indicated that Valentine allegedly assisted Brent after the shooting by helping him evade law enforcement. Valentine's charges were addressed in a separate court setting from Brent's capital murder hearing. Although her charges did not carry the same penalty as Brent's, accessory charges still carry significant sentencing ranges, depending on the court's findings and state guidelines. Following these early proceedings, updates in the public domain became inconsistent. Local outlets reported the initial arrests, the bond denial for Brent, and Valentine's accessory charge. However, no regular coverage of trial dates, motion hearings, or jury selection appeared in local press beyond the summer of 2022. This lack of reporting leaves the progress of the trial uncertain to the general public. It is possible that delays occurred in the case due to court backlogs, continuances filed by attorneys, or pending forensic evidence needed for trial preparation. Capital murder cases often take years to reach trial due to the extensive pretrial procedures required, such as competency evaluations, evidentiary hearings, and jury considerations. Court dockets in Hinds County could theoretically provide further information about motions, filings, and scheduling, but as far as publicly available reporting shows, little to no detail emerged in media outlets after the arrest and initial hearings. As of the last public updates, there has been no confirmed resolution of the case. No public record exists in media sources to confirm whether Brent was tried, convicted, acquitted, or proceedings remain pending. Similarly, the outcome of Valentine's accessory charge has not been consistently documented in local press. The absence of follow-up leaves a significant gap. It is unclear whether the case is stalled, remains in process behind closed doors, or advanced in ways that simply did not reach media attention. The limited public record highlights an information gap between the initial stage of high-profile arrests and eventual legal outcomes that determine accountability. Investigators identified Brent as Taria Jackson's former partner. Reports describe him as an ex-fiancé, establishing a prior personal and intimate relationship between him and the victim. This prior connection provided a starting point for police to examine potential motives behind the attack. Community accounts and speculation suggested that jealousy and relationship conflict may have played a role. Taria was in bed with her current boyfriend at the time of the shooting, which investigators likely considered when evaluating the circumstances. The dynamic of a former partner targeting someone during a private moment with a new partner has been interpreted by observers as a possible motive tied to resentment or unresolved conflict. In addition, whispers in the community refer to prior disputes between Brent and Taria, although no public documentation confirms whether these disputes were reported formally to authorities before the shooting. These references provide circumstantial context, but stop short of being confirmed as official evidence. The crime scene yielded ballistic evidence that investigators collected to reconstruct the sequence of events. Shell casings, bullet trajectories, and entry points would have been examined to determine how many shots were fired, the caliber of the weapon, and where shots originated from within the room. Forensic details also revealed that Brent sustained injuries consistent with gunfire. Reports stated that Taria's boyfriend returned fire during the attack, striking Brent before he fled. Brent later required medical treatment for his injuries at the time of his arrest, supporting the conclusion that a firearm exchange occurred during the incident. This fact aligns with the police narrative that the boyfriend's response caused Brent's injuries and may have prevented further casualties. Digital evidence may also have been reviewed. In modern homicide investigations, investigators often examine phones, texts, and social media for prior threats, communications, or planning that could establish intent. While no public report specifies what was discovered from digital records, it would have been a routine step in establishing motive and evidence. In addition to physical and digital evidence, witness testimony played a role. Neighbors reported hearing gunfire during the early morning hours. Some may have provided details regarding the sound of shots, the time of occurrence, or observations of movement around the home. Family and community members also spoke to media outlets about warning signs and disputes between Taria and Brent. These accounts suggest that there may have been a history of conflict that was visible to those close to the couple. Whether those statements were included in official investigative files or later court testimony remains unverified, but they add to the narrative of possible motive. The murder of Taria Jackson on June 7, 2022, produced an immediate ripple within her family and personal network. She was 26 years old at the time of her death, the second of 8 children, and well known in her Jackson, Mississippi community. Relatives and friends expressed shock at the sudden loss of someone they regarded as central to their family structure. The news spread quickly through word of mouth, local reporting, and social media, where her name and image circulated. Her funeral arrangements reflected the widespread grief in her community. Services were held at Jackson Memorial Funeral Service, where tributes documented her life from her birth in 1996 until her untimely death. Online memorial pages included photographs, written dedications, and messages from classmates, co-workers, and neighbors. These tributes reinforced the sense that her killing was not an isolated crime, but a significant disruption in the lives of many people around her. Digital platforms extended the memorial process beyond in-person gatherings. On Facebook, Taria's profile and post became a space for family members, friends, and acquaintances to leave comments, share memories, and emphasize the abrupt nature of her passing. Legacy.com and the funeral service's official website hosted her obituary, creating a permanent online record of her life. Messages from users highlighted her character, her ambitions, and her role as a sister, daughter, and friend. These online responses also served as a timeline, showing how the community processed her death in real time. The digital record underscored how modern memorial practices have extended into virtual spaces, where the narrative of a victim's life continues long after funeral services conclude. The community response expanded beyond personal tributes. Fear developed within the Fleetwood Drive neighborhood after reports confirmed that Taria was killed while lying in her own bed. The nature of the incident, an attack carried out inside a private home, raised questions about safety in Jackson. Home invasion-style shootings carry an added level of concern because they disrupt the idea of a residence as a place of security. Residents question how an assailant could force entry or approach the home without interception, and whether local law enforcement could prevent similar crimes in the future. Media coverage amplified these concerns, as outlets reported that this was one of multiple homicides in Jackson within hours of each other. For citizens, the message was clear. Violent crime was no longer limited to public spaces or criminal disputes, but could reach into domestic settings. After Taria's death, discussions in Jackson increasingly touched on two overlapping issues: domestic violence and gun violence. Reports suggested that the primary suspect, Zavarian Brent, was her former partner. Although official details about their relationship were not disclosed in depth, the possibility of prior personal conflict shifted the narrative toward domestic violence. Community advocates and local organizations pointed out that intimate-partner violence often escalates to lethal outcomes when firearms are involved. The case was cited in ongoing conversations about how the availability of guns in Jackson contributes to fatal incidents, especially within private relationships. Residents questioned whether warning signs had been missed, whether intervention mechanisms were available, and whether systemic support could have prevented the confrontation from turning deadly. The broader picture surrounding this case is Jackson's consistent struggle with homicide rates. In 2022, the city recorded one of the highest per capita homicide rates in the United States. Local news reports regularly highlighted shootings, and law enforcement officials acknowledged being overwhelmed by the volume of violent crimes. Taria's death fit into this wider trend. She was not the only victim that night, as another homicide occurred involving a burned vehicle. Whether or not the two cases were related, the timing contributed to perception of a city under siege. Jackson residents and commentators often describe the situation as a crisis, with gun violence cutting across neighborhoods and social groups. Her killing, therefore, was both a deeply personal tragedy and a statistical entry in a larger crisis. For many in Jackson, it represented not only the loss of an individual, but also another confirmation that violent crime was reaching unprecedented levels. While the arrest of Zavarian Brent established him as the primary suspect, a full motive was never publicly confirmed. Reports framed him as an ex-partner of the victim, but police statements did not expand on what led to the attack. Without an official explanation, the case leaves questions about whether the shooting was motivated by jealousy, unresolved disputes, or other undisclosed factors. After the arrest of Brent and accessory suspect Vida Valentine, media coverage quickly declined. Brent was denied bond and charged with capital murder, while Valentine was charged as an accessory after the fact. Beyond those hearings, there's been little accessible reporting on subsequent developments. Whether the case is moved toward trial, resulted in plea deals, or remains pending is unclear. One of the central unanswered questions is whether there was a documented history of domestic violence between Brent and Taria. If incidents had occurred previously, it raises questions about what legal or community responses were taken. Without public records or family disclosure, this remains speculative. Another homicide occurred in Jackson on the same night. A man found dead inside a burned vehicle. Police stated early on that the two incidents were unrelated, but the close timing and geographical proximity left some community members questioning whether deeper links existed. Officially, no evidence of a connection has been released. The decline in media coverage after initial arrests is another unresolved issue. Stories that begin with widespread reporting often fade quickly once suspects are in custody, leaving the public without closure. For Taria's case, this media silence means her story remains incomplete in the public record, with no accessible documentation of later legal proceedings or final outcomes. Taria Lamondria Jackson, 26, was killed inside her own home while lying in bed. She was remembered as a daughter, sister, and community member whose life was abruptly ended in June 2022. The method of her killing, a forced entry and multiple gunshots while she lay in a private space, underscored the severity of the crime. It was a direct breach of what most consider the most secure setting, making it particularly notable in the history of Jackson's homicide cases. The case remains defined by unanswered questions. A clear motive has not been established publicly. Court records have not been widely reported, leaving ambiguity about whether justice has been carried out. Potential prior warning signs remain undocumented. The simultaneous homicide raises questions that have not been addressed. Taria's death reflects larger issues in Jackson, a city with consistently high homicide rates. It highlights patterns of domestic violence intersecting with firearm access and the vulnerabilities present in private spaces. Bringing Taria Jackson's case back into focus is essential. Her story was quickly overshadowed by broader crime trends and a decline in reporting after arrests. Revisiting her case restores attention to an unresolved narrative, exposes gaps in the system, and demands accountability. Documenting these details ensures that her name is not lost within the statistics of Jackson's violence, but recognized as part of a larger pattern that requires examination and change. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.